Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining us on whatever platform you're listening to us on and wherever in the world that you are listening to us. Hopefully, you guys who are listening are within your season, you're coaching, you're doing your thing, your players are doing your thing, and everyone's doing it safe, everyone's doing it the right way. That is what I'm personally hopeful for. So hopefully everything for you guys listening is going really well. Today's topic is one that a lot of coaches are always striving for, particularly in their practices. We're going to talk today about competitive drills and drills that kind of bring the most out of your team and in a way kind of simulate those game type situations. I think a lot of coaches, including myself, are always looking for ways to make our drills or make our practices more competitive, have our guys and girls compete more and just really get after it. So I'm hoping that you're going to get some new ideas, or maybe it will affirm some of the things that you guys are already doing in your practices. So this should be a fun one. I'm a competitive coach. I know a lot of you listening are competitive. So having competitive drills, I think, is going to be a great topic to discuss. And so here to discuss this topic with me, I'm very fortunate to have a coach who is all about competitive drills and likes talking about it. So this is going to be really great to get their insight. I am joined today by Coach Adam Palczewski. Coach, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing great, Coach. And as I said in the onset, a competitive coach, I love seeing the players, get after it on the court and everything. So I'm looking forward to this one. And I might be stealing some ideas here. So I'm writing some stuff down and might be taking stuff for my own use. So, Coach, let's go get started with your journey. I know you coach a couple different sports, so you have a couple different coaching hats you wear. But where has the basketball game taken you? Where's your coaching journey taken you? Tell us about that.
Basketball kind of took me by surprise. I played college football actually at North Dakota State University, which is a FCS level powerhouse right now. They're pretty good, but that's kind of where I thought I would go with my coaching journey. But I got a couple of jobs. I worked in Minnesota for a year, and then I moved to Denver, Colorado for a couple of years. And I had a football coach that I was coaching with who also coached boys basketball, and we got along well. He asked me to coach with him. I said, sure, you bet. And he really laid the foundation down for me to start coaching out in Denver. And then I only spent 1 year coaching with him before I moved back to my home state of North Dakota. But I started kind of a late thing. I was just going to coach football again. And about 2 weeks before the season started, they needed a freshman basketball coach. And I had gotten to know the varsity head coach really well and his assistant. His JV assistant also coached football with me. And I started coaching freshman basketball. And that was, 12 years ago now. It's been the journey. So start with the freshman level, and I just you put everything you have into whatever team you're coaching. So I coached that for 4 years, and then I coached the sophomore team for a couple of years and the JV team for a couple of years, and then worked my way up. The coach that was there moved on, and I got the head job, and I'm in year 4 now. And it's just it's been a lot of fun to have. Now that it's my 4th year, to have the kids that have only had me as a head coach, where they really believe in what we're doing. They're totally bought in, and it's been a really good year so far.
It's funny that you talk about your football background and how it kind of related to getting into basketball. I feel like as coaches, we talk a lot about the football players who end up kind of playing on our basketball team, even if they aren't necessarily like the best basketball players. And you kind of took the coaching route there, where it seems like, football is obviously your thing and that's what you played and that's what you're really into. And then you kind of stepped into basketball and then fell in love with that too. So I think that's awesome. And you played at North Dakota State, which beat my alma mater a few years ago, Illinois State, I think, in the FCS championship game. But
that was a good one. That was a good one.
It was, I guess, for some people it was. So You have a football background, and I'm not gonna make any assumptions, so I'm just gonna flat out just ask: does football kind of lead to you liking to do those competitive drills? Because my limited understanding of football is that some of the drills and some of the things that are done can get really competitive and a lot of competition involved. So let me start with that first. Is that kind of that football mindset kind of led into a competitive basketball mindset? Can you talk about that?
It probably did lay the groundwork for that. One thing that too, just not just the drills, but I had some coaches playing college football that are now in the NFL, and they were fantastic as far as what they got us to do and how and it wasn't ever a vicious thing like, oh, you got to beat this guy today. It was just, hey, we're trying to get as good as we can get every rep, and you can't waste any rep. So just having professional coaches really influenced me in how they go about practice was a huge thing when I was playing college football. And then the other thing they really taught me, well, there's a few things, but one other is time management. As football coaches, we always have periods, and every period is usually 5 minutes. And you might have a drill that goes one period, you might have a drill that goes 6 periods, or sometimes if it's a kind of wrapping things up before a game day, it's just you run team and you do that for 12 periods, so a full hour. So the practice organization that football coaches get, I think, is really a big thing as far as breaking down practice and getting what you want and staying on schedule and getting the most out of your drills. And, we're going to talk about competitive drills, but I think if your drills are competitive, you get the best reps so you can move on to the next thing faster. That was a big thing. And then the other thing is with football goes that any sport you have to be athletic. And playing football, I played on the defensive line, but it gets you in that athletic position as far as defending someone else with your hips down in balance. You learn your body. You learn explosive techniques as far as how to be fast and fast twitch and things like that. So I take a lot from coaching football and playing at the college level that I would say definitely influences my basketball coaching.
Yeah, and I really like the part that you mentioned about time management, because I think all coaches are looking to have the most efficient practices as well. I know that one of the mantras I've always heard is, if you can get it done in an hour, then don't use 2 hours for it if you can get it done in a more efficient manner. So I really like that carryover of the time management piece. And just to kind of follow up with that, what was the biggest adjustment that you made kind of going from playing and then coaching football to coaching basketball, especially like you said, because you started more at the freshman level and worked your way up? So what were some adjustments that you had to make? And also, what really translated well from coaching football into coaching basketball?
Well, I'll start with that part. The biggest thing is, up in North Dakota, we have a lot of multi-sport athletes. We do not have many kids that just play one sport. So, coach football in the fall, you get to, evaluate a lot of the players you're going to have, see how they move, see how they compete, see how good of a teammate they are, see if when they get knocked down, they get back up and they still got the fight in them. You get to see a lot about a kid and their character on the football field before they even step foot in the gym. So that's one of the biggest advantages, I think, to coaching football, is you get to just be with your kids more often and develop those relationships as well. Every sport is a little bit different, and football is great. I love having an impact on, 60 or 80 kids at one time. But, the basketball side of it, as far as those relationships go, and it's really a big reason I got into basketball, is because you only have a varsity team of, maybe 15 kids, probably closer to 12, but you get to develop those deeper relationships. You get to really know the kids, and you have, adult conversations about what's going on in their life and how they're handling it. And, you get to really learn more about them than just how they are as a player. And that's one of the best things about coaching both sports, going back and forth and really developing the relationships with the kids. That's a good one.
Yeah, I never really considered that, even though I knew it, that if you're coaching football, how many players you're responsible for, how many players you're kind of keeping up with and keeping tabs on. I know you have a lot of assistant coaches as well and everything, and there's a whole coaching staff, but it's a lot of players. And then with basketball, it's a little bit easier in a way to kind of manage having them on the court and not having as many. So yeah, and I think the importance of multi-sport athletes couldn't be stressed enough. And really quickly before we get to this topic, do you coach football players as well on your basketball team? And can you speak about that if you do, or what the importance is of those multi-sport athletes?
Yeah, of my starting five, three of them played football, and two were first team All-State this year, and so pretty darn good players. And the other one was all conference, first team player. So
sure,
those guys are they're just solid. And the one thing too, that when you coach football players and that play basketball, and basketball players that play football, vice versa, because they play year round and they have a physically demanding life, they're really bought into the weight room as well. And I've said for a long time that you're going to win more games with men than with boys. So if you can develop their body and give them that strength, they're going to just win games based on sheer athletic ability and size, over some teams that don't buy into the weight room.
I like that quote. I think I'm going to write that one down. I'll have to use substitute women and men, but I like that quote a lot, actually. And yeah, that's a good point that they probably get after it in the weight room. And I also think another thing too that really helps with having multi-sport athletes is I think it kind of lessens the burnout. And I think that's a big concern that a lot of basketball coaches have, especially if they have really talented players that end up playing AAU or club or just playing year round, that it's really easy to kind of get burned out. But I can imagine that football players, some of them, really look forward to like the change of pace of like going into basketball season, because as you can probably speak to, football season can be pretty grueling, especially if you get to work in the summer and the fall. That I'm sure some of your players just really look forward to just the change of getting to have basketball season, getting to do a different sport as well.
They definitely do. That change up is great. It keeps their mind fresh. It keeps their body fresh. And in North Dakota, we start football when it's about 100 degrees outside, and we end football when it's about 10 degrees outside. So in that 10-degree time, they're ready to get back in the gym where it's warm.
That's true. Very true about that. And yeah, I'm sure out here in Arizona, it's 120 in the summer. I'm sure some of them can't wait, especially with all those pads and everything on, to get into a gym and to do that. So nice. All right, Coach. So we're going to talk about competitive drills, but before we even kind of get into it, let's sort of define what that means to you. When you say that you're passionate about having competitive drills, can you kind of walk us through what that philosophy means to you and what its importance is to you?
Well, as I have gone through coaching, the biggest thing I've found that if players are coaching each other, that's some of the best ways to get across the information you want. That's when you have a team that's going to be really solid together. So that's a big part of it. And then because it's competitive drills where there's winners and losers, and for lack of a better term, just say if you lose, there's a punishment, or something that you have to do. It gives those guys skin in the game. Like they're invested because no one wants to lose. And if someone's not holding up their end of the competitive bargain, our guys, it's been through years of training. They aren't born like this. And it's taken me, like I said, 4 years to get to this point. But they tell each other, hey, that's not good enough. You need to do this. This is how you do it. And they're not just yelling to be mean and show that, oh, I'm better than you. It's that, hey, this is how we play. So you will play this way. And it has been going on now for, all of this year, and it kind of started last year a little bit with our guys taking more ownership. So I think the competitive drills really bring in player accountability, like I said, skin in the game, and helps them coach each other and work through things. Because in those competitive drills, I don't coach a lot. I let them play. And I let them do, and learn and make mistakes and get better the next time. Because with those competitive drills, winners and losers, once you lose once, you want to run it back. You want to get another shot at those guys. So I let that kind of go, and it's been pretty rewarding so far.
So let's talk a little bit about the groundwork that needs to be laid for that to happen, because I think that that's a huge piece where before you can even get to doing those competitive drills where the players are kind of pushing each other, but also in a respectful way, you kind of have to have a certain culture where that is accepted and players are willing to be pushed by one another. So can you speak about the culture building and the process so that the players were ready and successful in that sort of environment?
Yeah. It's, and this is coaches and older people always talk about how good it was back in our day and all this stuff. But I really think kids haven't gotten to go out and be in the park with their friends for 3-4 hours and, get into those arguments about what's a foul, what isn't a foul. And they've been very protected, and they don't have permission. I think it's they feel they don't have permission to get on someone else, because there's always been an adult there. There's always been an adult who says, nope, this is how we're doing it, Johnny, and we're doing it this way. And they always take the reins. They don't let those kids have those natural interactions that I know I had growing up when I was playing with my friends, as far as, hey, we're trying to win, or you're trying to beat the other guys you're playing against. They don't get those interactions. So the biggest thing is, number one, giving them permission to talk to each other, to coach each other, to get on each other if the effort isn't there that needs to be given. And that's kind of where it all starts, I guess, for me. And ever since I was an assistant, actually, so this is, and I'm not doing it this year because of where we're at, but I've done a book study with my kids for, I want to say I did it for 7 straight years, different books that that I felt worked for our team, what we needed at the moment for that year. And all those book studies, again, have laid that groundwork or that culture about how to hold yourself accountable, how to hold your team accountable, how to give your best effort, how to encourage your teammates when they're down, how to recognize when someone's not right. If they're having a bad day or if they're having something like that, it's not the time to yell at them. It's the time to encourage them, to help them to play better, because for a lot of kids, that I know pretty much every coach has kids that 2 hours or 3 hours of basketball practice is the best time of their entire day.
Yep.
So it doesn't need to be a grind. They don't need to get yelled at. They don't need to get embarrassed during that time. And a lot of times, if that coaching and that, not so much yelling, but if that comes from their friends, they take it better too. So I just want to give my kids permission to be good teammates, to be almost coaches on the court, and to be caring teammates as well.
I'm going to put you on the spot if you can remember any off the top of your head, but do you have any book recommendations for coaches out there that they might want to look into?
Yes, and I like to keep them simple because everyone's different at a different reading level and stuff like that. But some easy ones to read are John Gordon, Energy Bus, Training Camp, and then The Hard Hat. They're all 3 fantastic books that they can get into. We did Jay Billis's Toughness, which I think a lot of coaches have at least read the article, if not read the book.
Yep.
We did a book a couple years ago called Pound the Stone by Joshua Metcalf, which was really good. And then I have some other books that I kind of keep around. I just give to kids individually, like, hey, read this book. And I'll tell you one story about that. We had Training Camp by John Gordon, and I had read it, and I had this kid who was a sophomore, backup point guard, had the talent to play, didn't have the head to play yet. And he was kind of a little selfish and didn't work hard on the defensive end. And I gave him that book, and my assistant, my JV coach, and I kind of tag teamed it. But we kept saying, have you read the book yet? Have you read the book yet? And finally he comes to us and starts talking about the book. And lo and behold, he kind of changes his whole game. He lets the offense come to him. He gets other people involved. He starts becoming a great defensive player. And actually in our state tournament, he went from playing basically no minutes a game to probably playing 15 to 20 minutes a game, just because his mindset changed so much that he was extraordinarily valuable to us. So.
And I think that That speaks to kind of going maybe what some would consider to be like above and beyond, because that's an investment on your end to not only, have read these books, and you may have read them before you even, assign them, but to read those books and to talk about them and talk about what they mean, and also hold your team accountable for reading them as well. But I think that also kind of speaks to teaching lessons that kind of go beyond basketball, because it seems like for that particular player, what they learned from reading that, they can probably apply well beyond their basketball playing days, which I think ultimately is probably even more satisfying than anything necessarily basketball related.
Yeah, and you can find out a lot through these book studies. We have our kids kind of talk together at times, but they'll often be shy and they don't quite have the trust yet to kind of lay their soul out. But I've made my own worksheets to go with them where they can write it down, and the kids will write stuff that really is honest and true. And so I always make sure I read through those to see what's going on, and then I take a kid aside here or there and talk to them about what they're going through or what they're feeling, and just really try to work on that piece. Because if a kid feels like you care about them as a coach, they're going to give everything they have for you.
Yep, absolutely. I can attest to that myself. Now, before we get into some more X's and O's and more specific drills, one of the things I did want to circle back to is you mentioned how maybe older generations, when they used to play, they would go to the park or whatever, and they play for hours, call their own fouls, get after it, get a little bloody. But now you mentioned how it seems to be more so where there's adults that kind of step in, or it's more organized or more officiated to kind of step in and kind of get things more organized. So for your situation, when you're kind of doing these drills and in these more competitive situations, is there any specific like instances or examples you can remember where maybe in a traditional like setting, coaches today would step in, but you sort of just let it go and let the players handle it out? Are there any instances that come to mind where you had to maybe like stop yourself and make sure you didn't get involved and just sort of see how it played out and how your players dealt with it?
That's kind of something that has developed over time. I know when I was younger, if I saw something that was wrong, and it really depends on the situation. Am I teaching? Is it a teaching period, or am I letting them compete and letting them go? Because if I see a wrong step or a bad body position, especially on the defensive end, I'm blowing the whistle right away, and we're stopping practice. That nope, this is how you do it. This is how you do it. And again, a lot of that is taught in camp in the summer, and some of those things. So by the time our season rolls around, our veteran players know how to do that, and coach the other guys, and they help each other out. And so that's a big thing. But if I were to say, we can maybe talk about this later, but my favorite competitive drill is defensive cutthroat. 4-on-4-on-4 is how we play it in the half court, and we lay out all our defensive rules. And if someone violates that rule, the defense is out, offense goes to defense, new defense in, or new offense in. And that really gets the players, that gets their competitive juices flowing and gets them talking to each other. Because, if you're close to that defensive stop and you're going to turn a guy over, but, someone didn't get to the eye in that help position, they were lazy and stayed on the outside of the lane, they're out, and they don't like to lose. So
Sure.
That's the biggest drill right now. We do that, weekly, if not twice a week, because it's easier to teach all our stuff through that kind of competitive drill.
So are there specific things that you are expecting that your senior, more veteran players would correct so that you don't have to? What sort of level of policing do you expect your older players to do to kind of keep things going, and where you don't feel like you should be the one who has to like blow the whistle or make that correction?
A lot of it was with the guys with more policing egos than anything, to tell you the truth.
Sure. Yep.
You get young guys that come in, they think they're really good, and you know what? They're not. They try to catch the ball with one hand and turn it over, or they travel because they don't have balance with their feet. Those little things, and they don't listen. And those little things are where not just my seniors, but the guys that play, that really are invested, they take care of that pretty quick. So, and that's one thing, some of those absolutes, like catching the ball with two hands and really basic fundamental stuff. My kids have been, even from my first day, they would get on the new kids for not doing things the right way. So that's the biggest thing, is the kids help the other kids check their egos a little bit. And once you check your ego, you can start getting good.
And I think that it's really nice when you can have a senior, an upperclassman, check somebody else's ego. It's one thing for your coach to say it, but it's one of your players, or like a varsity player, like a star player says it, I think that has kind of a whole nother meaning, especially for a new player coming in.
Yeah.
So let's kind of get into some of these drills, Coach. We kind of talked about the cutthroat. I've done that before. I'm a big fan of that. What are some drills that you really like, that you think not only are good for teaching, but also really like bring out the competitiveness in your team?
Cutthroats is number one on my list. And just because it's so darn fun too. And the big thing that we get out of it is my kids are talking like crazy. And it's not just talking for making noise. I've heard teams that think they talk and they just make noise. You can't understand whatever they're saying. It's just junk, basically. So I throw that stuff away. But we try to speak, not just, don't want to say complete sentences, but in stuff that, people can understand, and then responding to those things as well. As far as, where to push the ball screen or things like that. And then they have to respond, because we don't just talk, we communicate. And communication is a two-way street. Someone talks, someone listens, and then it goes back and forth. So I can really see how into the game those guys are and how they're talking. That's a big thing with our cutthroat drill. And then
can I ask do you have cutthroat like rules? Are there certain things that like have to happen in cutthroat? I know everybody kind of coaches it and plays it a little bit differently. So specifically, what would cutthroat look like in your practice?
So I try to split the teams evenly. I don't usually load up one team. Try to make it even, so that, again, our older guys have to coach our younger guys a little bit. But we just have five defensive rules that are very basic in the half court. One is, if the ball is away from you and you're the weak side defender, you get across the eye. You're halfway across the lane. Some guys don't, because they're guarding a shooter, but in our cutthroat drill, that's not acceptable. You have to get that habit, and we can game plan for shooters and give that up if we need to. So get across the eye. We don't allow any face cuts. So no face cuts. That's the second rule. Third rule is no one gets 2 feet in the paint. No drives of 2 feet in the paint. No post touches. And then no offensive rebounds when a shot goes up. So those are our 5 rules. If any of those get violated, the defense is out, and the offense goes to defense, and then new offense comes in.
And so what have you seen in doing cutthroat? Because I know you really like it a lot. What have you personally seen when having it run in practice that you've kind of seen make your team better, or even translate into a game?
Well, again, I'll start with the communication piece. That's huge, because guys, are talking and listening and responding to how other people are talking. It keeps their head on a swivel. So many times when guys are cutting and stuff, players will turn their heads. They won't see the basketball. So it keeps us, keeps us turning our heads, keep us seeing ball and man. And then it creates a lot of trust, because you get guys, sometimes you put the teams together, and all of a sudden you get a group of 4 kids that just, maybe they played together longer, or on some of the same AAU teams or youth teams growing up, and they really know each other. And it's just like watching a symphony. Everything's coordinated. Everything works together a little bit better than normally. And then, like, hey, I should probably put those guys on the court together. That'd be a good idea. So,
yeah, I think you can definitely learn a lot by just sort of mixing and matching and having like these different teams, and you balance them out. And not only do you kind of see who works out well together, but I think you probably can speak to this too. You probably also see who kind of maybe steps up in that leadership role, maybe who recognizes like, okay, I see that these are my teammates and I kind of know what they can do and can't do. I'm going to kind of take charge and really communicate, make sure everybody's like needs to be where we need to be successful. Have you seen things like that?
Oh, definitely. The older guys take charge. They're pointing. They're not just doing their job. They're helping the other three guys do their job as well. I definitely see that all the time. And I only have two seniors this year, but they're both pretty darn good players. And I have a junior point guard whose dad was the former head coach who hired me to coach freshman basketball, and he's on another level as far as basketball intelligence. So he's coaching our seniors up as far as that goes. So I'm just lucky. I'm really blessed to have the kids that I have. There's no doubt about that. But to see them work together is a lot of fun. Yeah. And I should add one more thing about the cutthroat stuff. Mm-hmm. Is we have charges also. We try to take charges when we can. So that's basically ends the game. We played a 7. I didn't say that earlier, but we played a 7 stops. And I ref it pretty tight. We don't allow fouls either. But when a team gets to, 6 points or something, I ref it even tighter, blow the whistle, call something on them. And it's really good to see how they react. Do they complain about the call? Do their body language say something we don't want to have? And that's when I do stop the drill and say, hey, that's not how we act. That is, you're just showing everyone that you're disappointed in the call while the game's going on. Okay. Play on, those kind of things. So I get to see that with the guys a lot when I call it tighter, or maybe don't make a call they think should be there. And when I first started, the kids would complain a lot, and now, they don't complain anymore. So it's just, once again, building that culture, building that stuff when you realize things aren't always going to go your way, and you have to adjust and move on to the next play because there's still a game.
Yeah. And I think that it just helps for players, especially in the heat of a moment in like a real important game, for them to be able to be on the receiving end of a bad call or a call that they think is a bad one, and then just be able to kind of get in that next play mentality, because you could really easily have that whistle be blown and, not take advantage of that opportunity because the whistle's blown, and then it gets, in a player's head, and maybe the next 2 possessions aren't as effective as they could be because the player's still thinking about, what just happened with that previous whistle. So it sounds like too, what that does is just sort of get your players refocused and ready to get to whatever they need to do next, instead of just dwelling on what just happened.
Yep. 100%.
Yeah. So in your practice planning, how much, and I'm sure it may change depending on how long the season or where you're at in the season, but how competitive, or how many different competitive things do you like to do throughout the course of a season in your practice? Is there a certain percentage that you look for? Does it all kind of depend? Can you walk us through that?
It does depend, but if I were to generalize as far as how much, let's say I have a regular early season 2-hour practice, full 2 hours. I bet 30 minutes will be competitive at some level, especially, early on, because we're doing a lot of teaching early on too. So at 30 minutes is probably the minimum. We'll do a cutthroat drill. We'll play small side games too. We'll play 3-on-3. We'll play some 2-on-2. We did 2-on-2 ball screens today, and you try to guard a ball screen with 2 guys. That's tough to do, but we made them compete, and we had winners and losers. And if you lost, you did push-ups, and by the end, guys were figuring out, how to defend the ball screen with 2 guys and how to work together and talk. And it was really good to see. So you see a lot of growth when there's consequences. But I'd say, 30 minutes is a minimum for competitive stuff. Another thing that we do as far as competitive drills goes is we play full court 1-on-1. We restrict the area they can dribble on. We go, so many high school basketball courts have volleyball courts on them too. Mm-hmm. So we basically give the offense from the sideline to the volleyball court until half court, and then it's just fair game. So we play some full court 1-on-1, and if you get scored on, you get 5 push-ups. If you get a stop, the other guy gets 5 push-ups, and it's not a lot, but it just adds a little accountability, and that's a good one as well. And then we are also a pressing team, so sometimes our full court 1-on-1 is similar restrictions, but the offensive player just has to get from end line to end line in 10 seconds. And as a defensive player, you got to stop them. So it's hard to do, but you got to learn, if you do get beat, to not just sprint and run alongside the guy, but to actually sprint and get in front of them and cut them off.
That's big.
So a lot of that is taught.
I like the small side games, especially the 3-on-3 or the 2-on-2, the situation that you just mentioned. I think one of the advantages that I really like about them is, one, you can get multiple things going, and then two, players can't really hide. You can't really hide in a 2-on-2 or a 3-on-3 situation. Hopefully players can't really hide in 5-on-5, but I know for me it happens. But do you kind of notice that as well, that when you're kind of doing those small sided games, that it really like puts players in that position where they're going to have to do something for their team to do well, whether it's offensive or defensive?
Definitely does that. And then it really exposes, again, the old guys do pretty well because they've been through the system for a while, but the young guys, it really exposes them. And it's good because then you can coach them up and their teammates can coach them up. And I see that exactly like you do. It really, lays out some weaknesses that some guys have that we can work on.
So when I actually just want to, since you just talked about how you did the 2-on-2 with the ball screens, I just want to talk about that one really quickly. What did you notice? You kind of talked a little bit about it. What did you kind of notice in terms of their ball screens and their communication or lack thereof, or how did that go, and what was that drill like?
Well, we have a couple of different coverages. We jam the ball screen a lot. Actually, we try to ride that guy, the screener, up off his line so that it doesn't even matter, that we jam it and go under. And we also usually hard hedge it. So I gave our guys the option, you can do either one. You just call it as you're going. And with the hard hedge, you want to really force, you got to force your guy to take that ball screen. We're doing side ball screens today. So you got to force your guy to take that ball screen and use it. Otherwise, if you don't, he's going to rip a baseline and score on you every time. And again, we had a couple kids that weren't talking, that weren't, jumping to the low side to force them into that ball screen. And you could see it. And our guys, because it's 2-on-2 and there's so much space, they just ripped it baseline and scored. Once he got scored on 3 times in a row. And we stopped it. We taught him again how to do it. And by the end, we only did it. You get so much out of competitive drills in a short amount of time. We only did it for like 6 minutes total. Is all we played. But by the end, he was getting it, and they were getting their hands on passes and tips and stuff like that, and doing a pretty good job of it. So.
And with that specific situation, I guess that brings up kind of a follow-up question that I had in mind. When you're kind of doing competitive drills and you have like a player or a group of players who maybe is struggling and or just getting dunked on or isn't quite grasping it, have you found that you've had to kind of approach players differently with the way that you correct them and the way that you handle it? Is it been a culture thing where everybody kind of responds the same way? I'm really curious how players kind of respond when they've kind of been on the losing end or been getting beat up for a little bit in drills such as the one you just mentioned.
Well, that's a good question. That's a really good question. They are all different. They're all different. And, one kid as a junior is also a different kid as a senior. They grow in that way too. So yeah, you definitely have to keep in mind who you are talking to and what that person's going through. And as I said, earlier in the podcast, a lot of it is about relationships. And, some kid might be really having a bad day in general. Something might have happened that you don't even know about yet. And they're getting beat and it's just all coming down at once. So if it's not going well for someone, I usually pull them aside. I don't like, so this is one thing I get from football as well, is oftentimes I won't stop practice for one kid messing up and teach them all the time. I'll pull them out immediately, sub someone else in, tell them how to do it, like teach, that way practice keeps going. It's not 11 kids watching me coach one kid. I'm coaching my one kid, but 10 kids are still playing. So oftentimes that's kind of the approach I'll take is, all right, next guy in, come here, let's talk about this. What are you doing? And try to fix up that way. So practice keeps going. We can get more done. and then that kid also gets coached up. But if he's getting beat a lot and it's not looking good for him, maybe that's on me as a coach for putting him in the wrong group. And I have no problem saying that I make mistakes too.
Yeah, and I think that's something to definitely consider if you're having that sort of environment where, like, there's some players, I know I can think of some where I could chew them out up and down in front of everyone, and they'll just nod their head and keep going. And then there's others where if I do that, they're done. Like, I'll lose them for the rest of the day, and they won't be with me. And so that's really something to also consider. But I think that also kind of speaks to maybe some of the culture elements. If you have a really good culture where players are, bringing each other up and supporting one another, then if you as a coach have to, correct them, then, maybe the other players can sort of bring them up and kind of pump them up a little bit as well. It's almost like this little good cop, bad cop type situation. But yeah, every player is different. And I'll ask specifically now about, like, in a one-on-one situation, when you're doing the one-on-one, when you're kind of doing that, the full court with the rules that you mentioned, is that a situation where, like, the other players are, like, watching, like, the one-on-one happen? What's kind of like the environment for that? Because that might lead to some follow-up questions I have.
Yeah, we'll have so right now on my varsity and JV, we practice together, and we have 14 kids total. So we'll pair up and we'll put 3 pairs of guys, so 6 guys on one corner, and then the opposite corner will be the other 8 guys. And we just set the clock at 10 seconds and hit start, and we play it from there. So then the minute that horn buzzes, we reset it and the next guys go. And that actually gives them time for the loser to do their push-ups anyways. So we try to keep it going that way. It's not not just 2 guys, one group going, everyone watching. We try to get 2 groups, depending on what gym we have. We have an auxiliary gym, which is smaller, and then our main gym is pretty darn big. We might get just probably 2 groups on each corner, and then we can run through stuff even faster. But that's how we do that drill.
And as you've been doing that drill, because one-on-one, at least from my experience, a lot of ego involved in one-on-one situations. Has that been managed pretty well? Players are still good with each other. Players are okay getting beat or getting stopped, or has that been a process to kind of develop that as well?
No, it really hasn't. I started the full court one-on-one stuff with the restrictions that we place on them. Would have been not my first year as the head coach, but the second year, because we needed our guys. We weren't quite getting it done in the half court defensively, so we switched to a full court press to try to get the tempo up, and it seemed to work. But then certain guys would get beat and get beat bad. So, like, what can I do? Because we used to do kind of a drill that a lot of people do, where you're kind of just shuffling along trying to force the ball into the corner and shuffling back and forth, and it's not really competitive. So what can I do to make this better and to get our guys better and to not give up if they get beat off the dribble right away? So I came up with that drill, and it's worked for us so far. And right now we full court, we run and jump press the entire game, and it's really served us well, because the players know that's what we're going to do, and they know that this on the ball pressure and not getting beat, guarding your man. This is the best. This is the number one requirement of playing the full court press that we play. So they bought in really well. And then when one guy gets beat, they get a chance. So usually the defense gets beat. I mean, it's really hard to guard a guy, even with the restrictions we place on him, full court for 10 seconds if that guy has any type of handle at all. So we pair, good on good. We try to get guys at the same level that want to compete. And once in a while, you get a guy kind of reaching up to a guy that's better and see if he can take him on, which I love seeing. I love seeing guys take a risk like that and not play it safe. But we go down once and then we switch, and offense and defense switch. So you get a chance to get your revenge on the next time down. And they usually do.
Yeah, I'm sure they're looking forward to getting the opportunity to go, like, okay, if you got me on that one, okay, but just wait until it's my turn to go one-on-one on the offensive side. And you mentioned how that kind of directly translates into the type of defense, specifically the run and jump of the press that you want to run. And so That is the reason, and not the reason, but that is one of the reasons why you kind of do that one-on-one drill. And I feel like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like you can't have the best possible like press that you want to have unless you're doing things to really make things competitive. Because to me, doing a press is also kind of a mentality and a mindset just as much as it is a skill. So if you kind of found that there's been like a positive correlation between having these like competitive drills, competitive practices versus with also having an effective press defense.
Definitely. Yeah, the competitiveness helps tremendously with our press. And it also helps us late game situations when guys are tired. You know, if you're competing all through practice, like even at the end of practice, we'll do a drill. It's not even a drill, we play, but it's just basically 3 trips. We call it score, stop, score, something that a lot of coaches do. And if you get a score, stop, and if you get a score, stop, and a score, if you actually get it, the other team runs a sprint. And if you don't get it, they run a sprint, you know, vice versa. We try to do it that way. So that's at the end of practice, and that's when guys are tired. Yeah. And that's when you can really tell, okay, now it's time. There's something behind this again. Can you compete when you're tired? Can you compete when there's 3 minutes left in the game and maybe you're down 8 points and you got to not just put out great physical effort, but great mental effort as well, to not just, you know, running around for the sake of running around, but playing basketball in an aggressive way, trying to force turnovers, trying to get stops when you're dog tired.
Yeah, I like the idea of kind of running your stuff on the defensive end, especially like if you want to press, like doing it towards the end when they're tired, because you might need to run that press when there's, you know, 2 minutes left in the game and your players are tired, but you might need to still stick to that press and run it. So what better opportunity for them to get real exposure on that than to do it when they're tired in practice. So, you know, that makes perfect sense to me. With that, have you found like with doing this competitive stuff, especially like with the press defense and everything like that, really getting after it on the press defense, has there ever been like situations where you've kind of had to like almost like dial it back and like you've players like, you know, fouling each other, or they're getting really aggressive with their press? Like if you had to kind of balance, like kind of reining things in, where even on like the defensive side where it's like getting like too competitive or too much and you kind of got to get it back to basketball and refine it a little bit?
Definitely. I always, if we're playing to the point, and guys, you know, it's one thing to dive on the floor, but it's another thing to take a guy out, you know. And if we're getting to that point where it's ultra competitive, getting too physical, where, like you said, it's not basketball anymore, definitely we blow the whistle and we talk, because you can't let yourself get to that point in a real game anyways, you know, because the fouls you commit in a real game, they're going to hurt your team.
Yep.
So if guys are doing stupid things, and I consider plays like that where you're not really making plays in the ball, you're just hammering guys, those are selfish plays, in my opinion. And there's no place for selfishness in the game of basketball, at least not at our level. So that's definitely something where if guys are getting, you know, about to hurt each other, it's definitely time to stop that and have a conversation with our team. And then, you know, hopefully our players take care of that. Actually, you know, they tell a guy, hey, knock it off, and that kind of thing. And hopefully he takes that feedback well. And if he doesn't, then I can step in too and say, hey, your teammates are right. You're being a jerk right now. I have no problem telling those guys that. So
right. Yeah, I think that's a good way to kind of define it, is if like it's getting to the point where they're not doing basketball related things and they're just like out there like hurting one another, just like doing stuff that would never like fly in a game. Yeah, that's definitely a good time to kind of settle things down for sure. Now, something that just kind of popped in my mind as you were speaking is the idea of kind of having these competitive drills and really going after it in practice and being competitive. I think in a way also leads to players kind of being competitive with one another. And even when it comes in terms of like playing time or in terms of, you know, wanting to be successful. Have you had to deal with situations like that where like players are, I'm not saying they're not working together, but like they're really like competing with one another and really trying to kind of show that like they're the best. I don't know if that necessarily leads to like selfishness, but maybe you kind of get what I'm saying, where like your team's getting like really competitive with one another.
Yeah. I know what you're saying. As the head coach these last 4 years, I haven't had that situation. You know, everyone has, I guess, some of those kids that come through from time to time, and to tell you the truth, you try to evaluate that early on, and if you see someone like that, you know, oftentimes they don't even make the team. You know, if they're going to be that into themselves and that much of an ego. So that might just be, you know, someone that we say, hey, thanks for trying out, but you don't make our team better. Sorry. Here's what you should work on. Try again next year. That's kind of something that comes to mind with those things. But when I was coaching, I can think back to coaching freshman basketball when those kids are a little bit younger and a little bit less mature. I definitely had that where a guy's trying to show off. You know, he has a rivalry with the other guy because they were the best players on each of their own little traveling teams, and now they're together, and then they got to see who's better. And you know, you don't have time for that as a basketball coach. I just don't. So I try to nip it in the bud early and say this is not how we're doing things. And if you can't play well together, you just won't play. And if they're not playing, then they get, you know, they start to change.
Yeah, that's the ultimate motivator is if they're not seeing any playing time. That is true. Now this also made me think of, this is more of a broader question, more in terms of like a competitive environment, where for you as a coach, like if you're having like a lot of competitive drills and things are competitive and you're competing and you're really getting after it, how has it been for you as a coach to kind of like evaluate success for your team? Like, how do you kind of define success? Because I know in the traditional sense, you have these really competitive coaches who they define it, you know, by wins and losses. They're looking to compete and get after it every game. And because they are really competitive, and that's kind of what they do to define success. So it's kind of more of a personal question on you. Do you consider yourself to be like a really competitive coach, or how wanting that competitive environment versus like, you know, the sort of win at all costs sort of mentality?
No, it's definitely not. I mean, one of my favorite years coaching was the only year I ever had a losing record. And it was one of the best years ever because, again, we did competitive drills and those kids gave everything they had every day. They knew they weren't that talented. And they came and they listened to everything I said. They were all in for each other. And they actually overachieved considering the talent they had. But that year was just absolutely fantastic because they played together and they gave all they had. So there's not really a metric that I can put on paper to define what they're at. Obviously, we all, as coaches, we all want to win, but you can just tell when guys are a team, when they're playing together, and those competitive situations, they just build so much trust, I think, between my guys. You see who's playing hard, and you hold each other up, you lift each other up. And that's kind of the biggest thing that I look at as far as if we're having a successful year or not, is does our team act as one? Do they really believe in each other, trust each other, love each other, and give everything they have every night? If they do that, then the year is just fun. No matter how it ends, it's just fun and enjoyable, and I think worthwhile. It makes you realize, again, every year it happens more often than not, actually. My kids, I've had great kids. I've been blessed here with some fantastic players and people as well. But it just makes it all worthwhile because you can teach those lessons to the kids that, you know, this is in life. Give everything you have to your family. Give everything you have to your team, to your coworkers. Give what you can give. You're not going to get anything out of holding back. You're just not. So go ahead and compete and play hard and give all your effort in the things that you choose to do. And I think that's just a good life lesson to give our kids.
And I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think the toughest part is the balance of, for some coaches and probably me, I mean, I've been there before, where the players are giving everything that they have, and then you like still want them to still get better, and you still want them to do more. And sometimes I know I've kind of underappreciated the effort that they are trying their best they can, because I still think that they can be able to do more. I still think that they can achieve more, and I don't like take the time necessarily like I should have probably in the past, and probably still now, to really just recognize the all out effort that players are making. And so in that situation, in that particular season, were there specific instances that you recall where you're like, this is exactly what I would love to see on the basketball court? Were there things that when you were coaching in a game where this was like perfect, and even if the result on the scoreboard wasn't great, like it was exactly what you wanted to see?
Yeah. One thing that I can kind of tell if the kids are really bought in and doing everything right is how their fundamentals are.
That's a good one. Yeah.
You know, and our kids, our fundamentals were good. We just were really short and really slow. So that's what it is. But we did such good things. And one thing I could do too is I would stop practice. You know, we're playing some 5-on-5 and stuff like that. And I'd say, hey, why did you do that? You know, whatever it was, usually on offense, like, what did you see? And they would explain to me, well, I saw my defensive player doing this and the ball was here, so I made this cut. Or, you know, and they were just really just into the game. They loved playing. And they were thinking it. They were trying to get everything they could because they knew they had to be almost perfect to win. And, you know, that was just it was just fun to have those kids locked in.
You brought up something that I think is just super important to sort of like re-emphasize and as a reminder, not only to myself, but also to some people listening, is that you're going to maybe have those teams, and like you kind of mentioned, that might be a little shorter and they might be a little slower, and they are going to potentially give everything that they got in practice and compete with each other and go after each other. But it might not necessarily lead to, you know, perfect results on the court, because you might not be able to simulate the type of teams that you're going to go against. You know, if you have two players going after each other and, you know, they're not as quick or as tall as, you know, the team that you know you're going to play against, like that happens. But, and it sounds like in that situation, they were still giving everything that they had and competing, that they did the best, absolute best that they could. And, you know, you can't necessarily simulate who it is you're going to go up against, but, you know, it sounds like that team did everything they could to give themselves like the absolute best shot to be successful against whoever they played against.
Yep, they definitely did. And a couple things that I noticed, like when those kids are locked in like they were, it's almost like I'm developing another generation of coaches, because
yeah,
they couldn't do it physically at a super high level, but they could think the game. They were smart about it, and they knew how it should be played, and they could teach it to other people. And that was a huge thing for me. And, you know, I'll be the first to say, you know, when I played football at NDSU, I wasn't that good. You know, I didn't play very much at all. But I had a coach. He was our defensive coordinator, and he just got hired by the Raiders actually as their defensive coordinator. Gus Bradley's his name. And he had a philosophy that he gave to us, you know, on the defensive side of the ball. And I've had this hanging in my room at school, in my locker, in the coach's office. I look at it every day. And his philosophy was, have a genuine appreciation for the effort and commitment everyone makes, because together we shall succeed. And every time I go to practice, I just want to have a genuine appreciation for the effort and commitment that everyone is making to be there. It really gave me a great perspective at a young age, what athletics and coaching should be all about. And I've carried that with me for my entire career.
And then that idea of just having a competitive environment, it's not results based necessarily. It's effort based and giving it your all, and the results are going to be what they be. But it sounds like just having those competitive drills or competitive practice environment really does is just have the players give out like maximum effort and leave everything that they got, so that they don't have to second guess or wonder, you know, what if I tried a little bit harder. And I think for you as a coach, what that does, and I'll let you speak to it, is it kind of lets you as a coach know that you put your players in a position where you're going to try and get everything you could out of them so that you, even as a coach, didn't have to wonder like, oh, could I have pushed them more? Could I have whipped them? But I'll let you speak on that.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it. It's a lot of training. We and I like vocabulary. I think the words we use are really important. So we don't have practice plans. We have training plans. So we're always training them for something. We're training them to, like I said, to give their best effort. It's what is going to be your habit as you go through our program and then go through life. So we're definitely training them to give everything they have and to be competitive and stuff. And, I've had times where, I make mistakes as a coach, or I'll call a bad play or be in a bad defense. And when I make mistakes, I'm relying on the talent and effort and competitiveness of my kids to make up for my mistakes. And more often than not, I'm pleasantly surprised that they do. So it's good.
make us look good, right?
Yep.
Yeah, they can do. Yeah, for sure. Players can make us look good. And yeah, believe it or not, we aren't perfect as coaches. We try to be, but I mean, we compete and we show effort. And I think one of the things, and this is a little bit of an aside, I think one of the more powerful things that I've had as a coach, as an experience with my players, is when I actually did like apologize to them when I screwed something up, especially coaching. And I said, I thought that this was a thing to do, but it wasn't. And that was my fault. I take responsibility for it. And I find it personally amazing the way that like kids respond to that. And some of them get really wide-eyed and they're not really used to having adults like apologize to them for mistakes that they made. That's something I found, at least.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I do it, whenever I make a mistake. There's no sense in holding on and trying to, once again, that's an ego thing. We talk about ego a lot, but there's no sense in trying to think you're perfect as a coach because you aren't. And when you apologize to the kids, that's honest and it's real, and they respect you that much more for it. And what's going to happen is, and you've, I'm sure, have found this, that once you keep building that trust where they just, buy in even more to what you're trying to do, and it becomes a real team. Like, it's not just the kids playing together, but it's the kids and the coaches working together to make each other better and to build that team and build that trust. So I definitely, the apologizing. And then one thing, the guy that got me into coaching basketball in Denver, Colorado, he always said there's two phrases, 2 words each, that you can't say too many times. And one is I'm sorry, or I apologize, and the other is thank you. So a lot of times when a kid gives, just tremendous effort or kind of goes above and beyond, I make sure I say thank you to that kid, especially if it's out of their comfort level. Hey, thank you for, giving everything you had today. I noticed that. I noticed you were really, really bought in and really locked into practice today. Thank you for that. And it just tries to create that positive feedback loop so the kid does it the next day and realizes it's something worth doing.
And it kind of goes right with the same thing with apologizing. You'll be surprised too, for those listening, if you don't say thank you as much as even I know I should, like how little players ever hear that. Just maybe even as teenagers in general, how little that they hear the term like thank you or being thanked for something, and just like apologizing, it can definitely go a long way for sure. So yeah, no, that's great. Now, Coach, before we hit our concluding segment, I did want to just ask, is there any other like drills, or is there any other things that like you really like, whether they're competitive or not, any other like little things that you really like running in practice?
The only 2 things that I didn't hit on yet, we do what's called a kill drill. I got it from clinic talk with Chris Beard, but a kill is 3 stops in a row. So we just do that drill, and you stay on the court defensively until you get 3 stops in a row. And it can be a long, grueling process, but that's one that really helps us, because that'll, with our press and stuff, if we get 3 stops in a row, we're probably going to get some gap scoring and put up 6 or 8 straight points and really jump to a big lead. So that's a big one for us. And then the other one that I like to do is not even, I wouldn't even call it competitive drill, but it's just playing some situation. You're up by 2 points with 8 seconds left. Here's what we're doing, win or lose. What's happening? Or you're down, we've done down 12 with 6 minutes left. So I try to put them in those situations. I think situation is a big thing that that should be hit by basketball coaches. As far as getting them ready, because you're going to be in every situation every year. You're going to be up, down, and close end of the game. You're going to be up, down, big, middle, end of the game, something like that. So hitting that situation, and we even practice first half situations as far as, let's say we're up by 8 with 3 minutes left in the first half. We want to push that thing to 14. So we try to do that. And we usually play against our JV, and if our JV doesn't let that happen, then the JV wins, and then the varsity guys have to run a sprint, something like that. So I think playing that situation is huge.
I really like the situational stuff, especially if you put the clock in, you put the score in. I've seen coaches who have crowd noise that they even put in certain situations. You can get really creative with it. And just kind of like what you mentioned about the free stops in a row. I really like personally the idea of having, especially in your practices and your drills, winning or points being assigned for being successful on defense. And I kind of like having some things awarded that way. And like you mentioned, if you can get free stops in a row, or I think that kind of goes back into the score, or stop, score, stop, however you do it, where if you can get that certain action 3 times in a row, you should be getting something really good coming out of that. So definitely the encouragement of getting stops, I think is just super important. And the other thing too, not to steal all your thunder here, but the other thing about those situational stuff that I've done, I'm not sure if you've done it before too, is kind of have the players go in situations and just sort of see what they do and see what they come up with, because that will give you some insight as to where their head is at. And you might get some really good information, or you might get really scared really quickly, but it's better to have that happen in practice than whatever might happen in a game.
That's exactly it. You want to see their decision-making. You want to help. The big thing is just ask them, why did you make that decision? Why did you do that? And just, getting into them. And a lot of times I don't know. Well, I don't know is not a very good reason to do something, but you really get into their mind, like you just said. That's big. And then they can make those mistakes in practice, and then in the game they won't make them again. They just don't. So yeah, it's definitely it helps with seeing what kind of hand you've been dealt and how you can play those cards a little bit better.
And as an extra little tip for coaches, ask them why when they do something well too, because then you can trick them and throw them off, because they're going to be like, wait, what did I get in trouble for? I thought I did it right. No, you did. I'm asking you why you did it though.
Yep, that's really good. That's really good. Oh, and no, one more thing that helps us in our competitive drills in North Dakota high school basketball, we have a shot clock, 30-second shot clock.
Well, that is helpful. Very helpful.
Yeah, we can do a lot of stuff, just trying to play, getting a shot clock violation, just playing defense for 30 seconds. Those kind of things help us a lot in our competitive drills.
That's great. Bring that shot clock over here, Coach, please. In Arizona here, we're desperate. We need it.
I'm all for it.
That's funny. Okay, Coach. So to wrap up, 2 questions I ask every guest. So we'll start off with this first one. What is a coaching moment from your career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
I thought about this. I think the biggest thing I could say is not necessarily a moment, but just play the long game. Have a philosophy that you want to coach by, write it down, and play to that philosophy every year. Because, I was, when I first got the head coaching job, I had a really good team, but we didn't quite achieve at the end of the year like we should have. And you always want to say, okay, what can I do better? What do I have to change? And yeah, I tweaked some things, did some different things, but I stayed true to the philosophy. And right now, once we've cycled through new players and everyone's been in the program, it's been this year with the guys that I've been the head coach for the entire time they've been in high school. It's really working out well. They're bought in, and my philosophy is kind of, their philosophy now too, and it melds really well. So I think if I would have not been grounded in principle, as far as how we're going to go about things, how we're going to act, it might not have been quite as good as it is right now. So my biggest thing is play the long game. Find what you believe in and just go 100% at it, and it'll pay off down the road.
And if you have that philosophy and you stay committed to it, I think that's how you get your 4-year seniors to be relaying that to your freshmen, because your seniors have had that philosophy and they know what it is and they've been around it for 4 years, that they can be the ones that do the teaching for you. But like you said, you got to commit to it and stick through it so that those freshmen stick with that philosophy for 4 years. So it sounds like it yields some benefits that way for sure.
Definitely. And like I said, I like having principles, as far as, honesty and integrity and accountability are kind of the three that I talk about all the time, with our guys. And once you have that philosophy, every decision you make as a coach gets put through that filter, and whatever passes through stays in alignment with what you believe in, and those things that don't pass through, you get rid of. It makes your decision. I don't like it. I'm not a coach that has a lot of rules. I'm not a big rule person, because once you make a rule, you're either stuck in the decision you don't want to, in a situation you don't want to be in, or you become a hypocrite. And there's always extenuating situations. Some kids have, a lot harder lives than I ever had to live. I know that. And if they're doing the best they can, sometimes they deserve an exception, at times, as long as you're not taking advantage of it, stuff like that. But you run it through that filter, and you aren't pinned into having to do something because a rule says you have to do it.
Yeah, I like that. I hear a lot of discussion about, rules versus like standards, or rules versus philosophy, or like goals versus like standards, things that are a little bit more not just as rigid as like this rule got broken, or, this goal we didn't achieve, and, allowing that room for interpretation. Because like you said, every player is different. So that's really good. And okay, Coach, to wrap up, what I give every guest is my 60-second soapbox. It's your opportunity to get out your final thought, your closing message, just something to leave the listeners with. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor. And if you go over 60 seconds, that's okay too. Coach, the floor is yours.
Right. Well, I have two because I just talk too much. But number one, I'm going to keep the first one short. Let's get flopping out of basketball. I'm so tired of watching guys fall down for no reason, or there's some dangerous charge calls too, where guys are falling down. So one, let's band together and get flopping out of basketball. That's number one. But a little more serious one is be relentless on teaching the fundamentals. I think this game, someone else, I can't remember who said it, but it's overcoached and undertaught. And I think you have to teach catching the ball with two hands. I think you have to teach pivoting. I think you have to teach kids how to pass, and just hammer those things. Because if you have great fundamentals, you can, not everywhere, but you can probably play high school basketball at the very least. If you are extraordinarily fundamental, you will have such a great base as a player, and your team will work together better if they all have the same fundamentals. And we do the same fundamental drills every day almost. So I just don't think we can ever relax on teaching fundamentals.
I like that quote. I've heard that a few times, and I think that is so true about teach the game, teach the game of basketball. And I think that if you do that, you're going to find that you can open up your playbook and open up so many other things if your players under those fundamentals are, and they have that foundation that may not be the most exciting thing, and it may get a little tough to teach and go over, but once they know how to do it, whether it's pivoting, footwork, dribbling, layups, so much more, the whole game opens up for you. And to me, and more fun to coach too when more things open for you. So
exactly,
sounds like it all just sort of fit to be a teacher, especially of the fundamentals. So I like that a lot. Coach, I want to thank you for spending some time. We talked about competitive drills. We talked about your team and team culture, and kind of got into some other topics as well. So I think that this was a really beneficial conversation. So thanks for sharing your insight. I know you're in season now as speaking. So Coach Palczewski, thank you so much. Good luck going forward, and thanks for spending some time with us.
Thanks, Coach. It's been my pleasure, and happy to help you out any way I can. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And all of you listening, thank you so much for listening to this episode. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. We will see you guys next time.